It was just another glamorous Friday night at one of the city's most exclusive nightclubs. The music was loud, the lights were low, and the drinks were flowing. The lounge was filled with wealthy guests dressed in designer outfits, all trying to outshine one another. In the middle of it all, a young woman quietly walked in. She wore a simple black dress, elegant, but not flashy. No designer labels, no heavy jewelry, and no entourage. Just her calm presence and quiet confidence, but in a place where appearances speak louder than words. Her simplicity didn't go unnoticed for the wrong reasons. As she stood near the bar, trying to find a quiet spot to sit, she was met with glares and whispers. Some laughed, others took out their phones to record. And then, out of nowhere, the lounge manager stormed up to her. With a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, he pointed his finger and snapped, "You're lost. Hook or no clients here." Gasps echoed around the room. Laughter followed. Cameras rolled. But she didn't flinch. No tears, no shouting. She just stood there, silently watching him, as if waiting for something. People expected her to be embarrassed, to leave quietly with her head down. But instead, something completely unexpected happened. Because what no one in that room knew, not the crowd, not the manager, not even the so-called VIP guests, was that the woman they had just humiliated wasn't some stranger who had wandered in by mistake. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was there for a reason. A very specific reason. She owned the place. Not just that nightclub, but every single lounge in the entire chain. And she had come to see how her staff really treated people when they thought no one important was watching. What happened next would leave the crowd speechless and change the future of that club forever. She walked in quietly, without making a scene. No bodyguards, no designer purse, no glittering jewelry. Just a simple black dress, a calm expression, and the confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. In a nightclub packed with influencers, celebrities, and flashy partygoers, she didn't exactly fit in. Most people didn't even notice her at first, until one man decided to make her the center of attention. The lounge was buzzing, filled with a kind of crowd that lived for appearances. Bottles were popping, cameras flashing, and ego was everywhere. And then came the moment that changed everything. A man in a white suit, clearly someone in charge, marched straight up to her, raised his voice in front of everyone, and said something no one expected. "You're lost. You don't belong here." Some people turned to look, others laughed. A few started filming. To them, she was just some random woman who walked into a place she couldn't afford to be. But what they didn't realize was that the person they were mocking wasn't just another guest. She wasn't a lost outsider or someone trying to sneak into a fancy place. She had walked in for a reason, a very personal one. Because the truth was, she owned the entire chain of nightclubs. Every light, every glass, every table in that building was hers. And she had come that night, dressed like anyone else, to see how her staff treated people when no one was watching. Now, the same. People who laughed at her were about to find out who she really was. But before she said a word, she just stood there, letting the silence speak louder than anything. What came next would flip the room upside down and teach everyone in that club a lesson they'd never forget. She wasn't dressed to impress. No designer heels, no flashy jewelry, no dramatic entrance. Just a quiet, simple woman in a plain black dress, walking into one of the city's most high-end nightclubs. The kind of place where image meant everything and where people judged you the moment you walked through the door. Most guests didn't even glance at her. The few who did whispered. She didn't look like someone who belonged there, or so they thought. The lounge was packed. Music thumping, champagne flowing, cameras flashing. It was a night where everyone was trying to be seen. But in the middle of the noise, something unexpected happened. A man in a sharp white suit, clearly someone in charge, marched up to her. With a scowl, he didn't ask questions. He didn't even introduce himself. He pointed at her and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're in the wrong place. We don't allow people like you here." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Then came the snickers. Some guests pulled out their phones to record. Others laughed behind their glasses. To them, she was just someone who didn't fit their polished scene. But the woman didn't flinch. She stood there, calm, collected, and completely unfazed. No angry outburst, no dramatic exit. Just silence. Like she was waiting. What no one realized in that moment, what the manager, the guests, and the staff didn't know was that the woman they just humiliated wasn't some outsider trying to sneak into luxury. She wasn't looking for attention. She was the one signing their paychecks. She was the silent owner behind the entire nightclub chain. She came that night not as a boss, but as a customer, to see what really happened when no one knew who she ate. And now, with every eye on her and every phone camera recording, she was about to show them exactly who they were dealing with. But instead of reacting right away, she simply smiled. And what she did next changed everything. The silence in the room felt heavy. Everyone was waiting for a reaction, something dramatic, something loud. But instead, she just looked at the man calmly, then glanced around at the crowd, taking in. The phones pointed at her, the mocking smiles, the judgment in their eyes. Still, she didn't say a word. The manager, clearly enjoying the attention, stepped in closer and lowered his voice just enough for the people nearby to hear. "This place is for real guests. You should leave before security gets involved." The woman blinked slowly, like his words didn't bother her at all. In fact, she looked more curious than angry, as if she were observing a show. People in the crowd whispered things like, "Who does she think she is? And why doesn't she just leave?" But a few faces started to look uncomfortable. Not everyone was sure this was funny anymore. Then, without warning, a man in a dark suit approached her from the side. He looked nervous. Unlike the manager, he wasn't putting on a performance. He leaned in and said something quietly to her, sobbing no one could hear. Her eyes shifted to him for just a second, and she gave a small nod. That was it. Moments later, the music cut off. The lights dimmed, and the entire lounge started to buzz with confusion. People looked around. Waiters stopped in their tracks. Something was happening. The woman took one step forward, and the same manager who had shouted at her stepped back without even realizing it. His confidence started to crack. It was clear now something was off. Then, from the far side of the room, 2 more staff members came rushing in. Not to stop her, not to escort her out, but to stand by her side. The crowd didn't know what was going on, but they could feel that the energy had shifted. Whispers grew louder. Some guests even started lowering their phones. The woman, once mocked and dismissed, now stood in complete control of the room, and just before she opened her mouth to speak, the lounge doors swung open. The heavy lounge doors creaked open, pulling every eye in the room toward the entrance. In walked a sharply dressed older man, calm, but with an air of quiet authority. Unlike the flashy guests, he didn't demand attention, but he got it anyway. The staff immediately stiffened. Some whispered his name. He wasn't just anyone. He was the regional director of the entire nightclub chain, a man rarely seen on the floor. Someone who usually worked behind boardroom walls and corporate meetings. The moment he spotted the woman, he walked straight toward her without acknowledging anyone else. The manager, now visibly sweating, tried to step in, still clinging to the belief that he could fix whatever this was. "Sir, I was just handling a situation," he said quickly, gesturing toward her. She came in unannounced. I didn't recognize, but the man didn't even look at him. He stopped right in front of the woman and said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ma'am, I came as soon as I got your message. I'm sorry for the delay." The room froze. The manager's face went pale. Guests who had been laughing just moments earlier looked around in shock. A few people put their phones down slowly, realizing this wasn't a prank or a social experiment. This was something very real and they were all part of it. Then came the second twist, the one no one saw coming. The woman calmly turned to the regional director and said, "I wasn't just checking on the staff tonight. I had a meeting scheduled here with the buyer." She turned back toward the crowd. This location was supposed to be sold. A case filled the room again. Not only did she own the nightclub, they were now learning she was planning to sell it. And suddenly, everyone realized this might be their last night here. Jobs, reputations, even the future of the club itself, everything was hanging by a thread. The manager opened his mouth, trying to form words, but nothing came out. And before anyone could ask another question, she pulled a folded envelope from her clutch and placed it gently on the bar. The envelope sat there on the bar like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The woman didn't rush to explain, didn't raise her voice, and still didn't show even a flicker of anger. She simply looked at the regional director, then at the stunned manager, and finally let her words land. "This," she said quietly, "is the final evaluation report." Every location was reviewed. Every staff member observed. This lounge was supposed to be the flagship.